They say some summers change everything. I didn't believe it until mine began with a busted wrench, a half-full gas tank, and Caleb Morgan leaning against the side of his truck like he owned the damn sun. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Not since he dropped out of college and vanished into the kind of small-town mechanic life I always pretended I was too good for. And yet, there I was, back in Willow Bend for a week to help my dad fix up the family cabin. And Caleb was the one person I couldn't stop thinking about. Technically, we were never close. He was my older brother's best friend, too cool, too confident, always laughing too loudly and staying just a little too long after dinner. I was the quiet one who watched from the edge of the garage while they tinkered with engines and talked about girls. Caleb had always been kind to me in that effortless, lopsided smile way that felt like it meant more than it probably did. Maybe it was the way he'd ruffle my hair and call me kid, even when I was nearly his age. Or maybe it was the time. He waited with me in the rain outside prom, engine idling, coat over my shoulders, pretending we didn't hear my date laughing with someone else inside, but that was years ago. And yet, the moment I pulled into the dusty Shell station off Route 19 and spotted him under the flickering neon light's grimy hands, oil-stained shirt, that same crooked grin, I felt something shift in me, like an old record picking up where it left off. "Is that Micah Harris?" Caleb called out as I stepped out of the car, his voice warm, teasing. "I thought you'd traded all this in for city suits and oat milk." "Only on weekdays," I shot back, trying to sound casual, even as my pulse ticked up. The summer heat wrapped around us, thick and slow. Somewhere behind the station, a cicada buzzed lazily. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag, walking over. His eyes, stormy blue, same as I remembered, scanned me like he was looking for something familiar beneath all my polished city layers. "I heard you were back," he said, softer now. "Didn't think I'd actually see you." "Helping Dad at the cabin," I replied, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. "It's a mess," he nodded thoughtfully, then glanced at my trunk. "You got the right tools for that?" I opened it, showing him my shiny, barely used set. Caleb laughed. "Cute. Let me show you how to use a real tool." And that's how it started, just a simple offer, nothing more. But the way he said it, the gleam in his eye, the way his fingers brushed mine as he reached for the wrench, yeah. Something was definitely about to change. Caleb didn't ask why I came back alone. He just tossed a half-empty bottle of Gatorade my way and popped the hood of my dad's old pickup without ceremony. We'd fallen into rhythm faster than I expected him under the hood, me fumbling beside him with the socket wrench, pretending I knew what I was doing. "You always grip it like that?" he asked, smirking as he leaned over my shoulder. I caught the faint scent of motor oil and citrus, Caleb's signature, somehow still exactly the same after all this time. I rolled my eyes. "Do you criticize all your clients like this, or am I just special? You're not a client. You're Micah Harris, the guy who once tried to fix a chainsaw with duct tape and a prayer. That was one time, and it worked for a minute." Caleb laughed, low and genuine, the kind that settled somewhere in my chest. It was stupid how easy it was to fall back into this, whatever this was. Even with the heat, the sweat gathering at the back of my neck, and my complete lack of mechanical know-how, I felt oddly at peace. "I missed this," I said before I could stop myself. He paused, one brow raised. "Missed what?" "The smell of gasoline and regret?" I shrugged, wiping my hands on my shorts. "Just being back, seeing you." There was a beat of silence. Not awkward, just heavier than the air around us. "I missed it too," he said, quieter now. "Didn't think you'd be the one to show up at the station, though. Guess fate's got a sense of humor." The thing about Caleb was, even when he was joking, there was always this undercurrent, this flicker of something more behind his words. I'd spent most of my teenage years trying to decipher it, and most of my adult life pretending I hadn't cared. Back at the cabin, the complication showed up in the form of a broken AC and a dead generator. Well, guess we're sleeping hot, I muttered, peeling off my shirt and tossing it onto the nearest chair. The cabin's windows were cracked open, but all they offered was more summer heat and the distant sound of crickets. Damn, I'd offered to take you back to my place, but my place doesn't have a sea either, Caleb said, standing in the doorway, with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. You're sure your dad said it was fine if I crashed here? Yeah, I nodded, trying not to stare at the way his t-shirt clung to his chest. He was grateful you helped with the truck. Besides, the guest room's made up. He raised a brow. You mean the couch? Technically a pull-out, I corrected. Luxury accommodations. We moved around each other in the small space like magnets, close enough to feel the pull, but never quite touching. Every time I passed him in the kitchen, I felt the brush of his arm, the briefest glance over his shoulder, his eyes dipping to my lips when he thought I didn't notice. Later, we sat on the porch, 2 beers between us, the cicadas droning into the night. Caleb had kicked off his boots, his bare feet resting on the railing. You ever wonder if things would have been different? I asked suddenly, surprising even myself. Caleb turned his head slowly, his expression unreadable in the dim porch light. Different how? If we'd kept in touch more. If I'd said something back then. He was quiet, then took a slow sip of his beer. You mean like how you used to look at me when you thought I wasn't looking? My breath caught. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. But when I finally turned to face him, I caught that same look again, the one from years ago, behind laughter and late-night drives. And this time, it stayed. It started with a storm. Not the dramatic kind with booming thunder and cinematic lightning, just a steady, unexpected downpour that rolled in while Caleb and I were halfway through a supply run into town. Damn, Caleb muttered as we stood under the narrow gas station awning, watching the rain pour down in heavy sheets. Of course this happens the one time I leave the windows cracked in the truck. You don't have a tarp or something in the back? I asked. I did, he said, glancing at me with a lopsided smile. Then I'll let you borrow it 2 hours ago to cover firewood. Right. I grimaced. My bad. We both laughed. But the rain didn't let up. After 20 minutes of waiting and dodging puddles, Caleb sighed. We're not making it back up the hill in this. That road's pure mud when it gets soaked. We'll end up in a ditch. So, we stay here? I asked, glancing around the tiny supply shack adjacent to the pumps. It had a few essential shelves of chips and motor oil, an old couch in the back that looked like it had survived at least one hurricane, and a flickering bulb that gave the place a nostalgic kind of gloom. Looks like it, Caleb said. Hope. You like sleeping next to snack food and spark plugs. The sun was long gone by the time we settled in. The gas station guy, Jimmy, had gone home after giving Caleb a set of keys and a lazy warning to lock up behind you. We moved the couch cushions to the floor and spread out what we could find, an old emergency blanket, a few clean towels, and Caleb's hoodie, which still smelled like lemon soap and gasoline. I tried to claim one side, but Caleb, being taller, ended up pressed in closer than I'd anticipated. You sure you're comfortable? I asked as I lay rigid beside him, our arms nearly touching. I've slept on worse, he said, shifting slightly, his thigh brushing mine. He didn't move away. I stared at the ceiling. The rain tapped gently against the windows now, quieter but steady. The whole station felt like a snow globe sealed silent, a little surreal. Micah, he said after a long pause, you ever think about the stuff you don't say? I turned my head, meeting his eyes in the dim light. They looked different in the dark, softer, more open. All the time, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes I think I've built a whole life on what I haven't said. His lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. Yeah, same. The silence stretched again. I could feel the heat of his skin through our clothes, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Every nerve in me was on edge, but not in a bad way. It was like standing on the edge of a high dive, terrified but exhilarated. Wanting to jump, but unsure what waited below. I'd spent so many years pretending my feelings for Caleb were just admiration. A phase, a crush, something teenage and silly. But lying there next to him, with his shoulder brushing mine and his voice in the dark, all of it felt real. Tangible. Too real. What happens if I say something now? I asked quietly. What if it messes everything up? He looked over at me, his expression unreadable. Then gently, almost absently, he reached over and tugged the edge of the blanket higher over my chest. You think I'd be lying here with you if I was worried about that? He said, It wasn't the words that got me. It was the way he said them, low, calm, like he was offering me a lifeline instead of an answer. And suddenly, I realized the fear wasn't just about ruining what we had. It was about believing, even for a second, that he might feel the same and having to live with the possibility of that being true. I shifted, turning slightly onto my side to face him. He mirrored the movement. We were closer now, just inches apart. I could see the faint scruffle on his jaw, the twitch of his mouth like he was biting back something he wasn't ready to say. His hand rough, warm brushed against mine as he adjusted the blanket again, slower this time. His fingers lingered just a second too long. You're doing that on purpose, I said, my voice caught somewhere between nervous and teasing. What this? He asked, his fingers grazing mine again. I didn't move away. Neither did he. I don't think I'm imagining this, I said, my voice shaking a little. You're not, he said. You never were. I couldn't breathe. The space between us felt like the tightest part of a balloon right before it bursts. I wanted to touch him, really touch him, but my hand froze halfway there. You gonna keep looking at me like that? Caleb murmured. Or are you gonna do something about it? That broke me. Not in a bad way, in a freeing way, like a dam finally giving way after years of pressure. I let my hand settle on his chest, fingers splaying over the worn fabric of his hoodie. He didn't flinch. In fact, he leaned into the touch, his hand covering mine in return. No kiss. Not yet. Just stillness. Breathing. His heart beating under my palm. We stayed like that for a long time, half tangled in makeshift bedding, sharing heat and knowing without saying that something between us had changed forever. I didn't sleep that night, not really. Not with Caleb lying that close, his steady breaths inches from mine, our hands half intertwined under the blanket like neither of us had fully committed, but neither of us wanted to let go. My thoughts were a mess of memories and what-ifs, every heartbeat louder than the last. Sometime past midnight, when the rain had quieted to a soft patter and the world felt suspended in that fragile space between night and morning, Caleb stirred. Beside me. You still awake? He whispered. I didn't answer right away. My throat was tight. Yeah. He shifted, his leg brushing against mine, his fingers grazing my wrist like he was checking I hadn't drifted too far away. I was thinking about high school, he said softly. Remember that night we got caught sneaking beers behind the gym? I let out a quiet breath, half laugh, half sigh. You mean the night you got caught and I ran? Caleb grinned. In the dark. And you left me with 3 warm beers and a lecture from Coach McKay. You forgave me. Only because you snuck back and took the fall the next morning. I paused, letting the memory hang in the air between us. It felt like a lifetime ago, like those 2 dumb kids didn't know they were laying the foundation for something neither of them could admit back then. We were always good at saving each other, I said quietly. Caleb didn't respond, not right away. Then he shifted again, this time propping himself slightly on one elbow so I could feel the weight of his gaze even in the dim light. Micah, you ever wonder why we never really dated anyone? I mean, not for long. My stomach clenched. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Didn't want to push him away with too much truth or lose him with too little. I wondered. I admitted. Sometimes I told myself it was bad timing. Or bad luck. And the rest of the time? I told myself I was in love with someone who didn't want me back. The words left me before I could stop them. I could feel the shift in the air, like everything had just turned sharper. More real. I expected him to laugh. Or get quiet. Or pretend he hadn't heard me. Instead, he stayed completely still. You talking about me? I nodded before I could talk myself out of it. Yeah, you. It's always been you. There was a pause, heavy, breathless. His fingers found mine again, but this time there was no hesitation. He laced them together like he meant it. I kind of knew, he whispered. I didn't want to believe it, but I felt it. Especially lately. I'd catch you looking at me and I'd feel something. And instead of being scared, I just wanted it to be true. His voice broke a little on the last word. It made something crack open in my chest. Then why didn't you say anything? Because you're you, he said, his thumb brushing over my knuckles, and I'm me, and I didn't want to screw this up. I didn't want to lose you. You wouldn't have, I said, my voice rough. Even if you didn't feel the same. I'd rather have you as my friend than not at all. He exhaled slowly. Thing is, I do feel the same. I just didn't have the guts to admit it until now. I turned my head to look at him. In the low light, I could make out the lines of his face, his mouth slightly parted, his brow tense, with something like fear. You don't have to say this just because we're here, I said. Because it's late and we're alone and it feels like a movie scene. I'm not, he said, shaking his head. I swear to God, Micah, I've been holding this in for years. I didn't have a name for it at first. I just knew that every time you dated someone, I got weirdly jealous. And every time something went wrong in my life, the only person I wanted to see was you. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady myself. Why now? Because we're stuck in a gas station sleeping on couch cushions. And somehow that feels more right than any relationship I've ever been in. Because I'm tired of pretending. And because when you touched me earlier, I didn't want you to stop. The vulnerability in his voice was a punch straight to my chest. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't playing. He was just Caleb, honest, a little scared, entirely real. I used to dream about this, I admitted. Not this exact moment, but something like it. You, lying next to me, saying this. What would happen in the dream? He asked. I'd kiss you, I said, and you'd kiss me back. We were quiet for a moment. Then he leaned in, slow and cautious, like he wasn't sure if I'd pull away. I didn't. His lips met mine in a kiss that was nothing like I expected, and somehow everything I'd hoped for. It wasn't perfect or practiced. It was soft, hesitant, a question wrapped in warmth, and I kissed him back like an answer. It wasn't just about want, it was about knowing. That we'd found something fragile but real. Something that had lived in silence for years and was finally being allowed to breathe. When we pulled apart, I felt like I could finally take a full breath. Caleb rested his forehead against mine. I've never kissed a guy before. I've never kissed you before, I said. So we're even. He laughed, quiet and shaky. This is real, right? We're not dreaming? If it is, I said, don't wake me up. We lay there in the quiet, hearts still racing, hands still tangled together. It was everything I'd wanted and nothing like I'd imagined. Better. Because it was us. And it was finally real. Morning found us tangled together like it was the most natural thing in the world. I woke to the soft warmth of Caleb's body tucked against mine, his head resting on my shoulder, his breath feathering across my collarbone. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet gray sky and the faint drip-drip of leftover rain sliding from the gas station awning. For a second, I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, but then he shifted, muttering something incoherent before his arm wrapped tighter around my waist. His fingers splayed across my stomach like he'd done it before, like it was instinct. I smiled at the ceiling. He blinked up at me a moment later, his hair sticking out at weird angles and his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning," I whispered. He groaned. "God, you're smiling like a Hallmark movie." "Because I'm waking." "Up with you glued to my side?" "Exactly." He yawned, then buried his face against my chest. "You're never gonna let me live this down, are you?" "Nope," I said, brushing my fingers through his messy hair. "I plan to bring this up at every possible opportunity." He chuckled, the sound low and warm against my ribs. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I kissed. You. "Well," I said, pretending to sound offended, "you didn't seem that reluctant." "I wasn't," he admitted, lifting his head just enough to look at me. That's the terrifying part. There was a flicker of hesitation behind his smile, and I caught it just barely. "What's going through your head?" I asked gently. He was quiet for a beat. Then, "I don't want this to be a one-night thing. Or, we got stranded at a gas station and made out thing. I want to know what this means. For real." I reached for his hand and laced our fingers together again like I had the night before. "It means we stop pretending. It means we figure it out together. Even if it's messy. Even if it's confusing as hell and we have to tell my brother I'm dating his best friend." I laughed. "Especially then." Caleb groaned and dropped his head back onto my chest. "We are so dead." "I'll take the heat," I said. "You just have to keep waking up next to me." He peeked up again, eyes soft now, mouth curling into something real. "You sure about this?" I answered without thinking. I've never been more sure of anything. We stayed quiet after that, just soaking it in this new layer between us. There was something almost giddy about the way his pinky kept brushing mine, like he couldn't stop touching me. Like now that it was allowed, he didn't want to stop. Eventually, we dragged ourselves up and started cleaning the chaos we'd left behind, blankets folded, couch cushions stacked. We moved around each other with this unspoken awareness, like gravity had changed overnight, and suddenly we were pulled together by something stronger than before. I passed him his hoodie. He caught my wrist instead. "Hey," he said, quieter. "Now, when we get back home, does this keep going?" I nodded. "Yeah, if you want it to." "I do?" He squeezed my fingers. "I don't know exactly what this looks like yet, but I want to figure it out with you." "Good," I said, leaning in just enough to kiss the corner of his mouth. "Because I don't want to go back to pretending we're just friends." He grinned. "Guess we're officially that couple who fell for each other during a gas station sleepover." "The most romantic origin story," I deadpanned. "Shut up," he said, laughing. "We're telling everyone we got stranded during a hurricane or something. Way cooler." I let out a breathy laugh and pulled him in again just to feel his heartbeat against mine. We still had a long drive ahead of us. We still had questions to answer, people to talk to, real life to return to. But for now, we had this, and it was enough. The clouds had cleared by the time we hit the road again, the morning sun spilling soft gold across the pavement. Caleb insisted on driving, claiming I'd sacrificed enough of my pride for one trip by letting him see me fall asleep with my mouth open. I didn't argue, mostly because I liked watching him in the driver's seat, one hand loosely resting on the wheel, the other reaching occasionally toward the console to adjust the music. Every now and then, his fingers brushed mine, casually, like it was a habit he didn't want to break. We didn't talk much for the first half hour. Not because there was nothing to say, just because silence felt okay now. Easy, even. My gaze drifted to the horizon, a stretch of road lined with trees and open sky. And for the first time in a while, the future didn't feel like something I had to brace for. "So," Caleb said eventually, glancing over, "are we telling people?" I smiled. "You mean, are we dropping a bomb on your brother the second we walk through the door?" He snorted. "I was thinking more like easing into it, letting him get used to the idea before he starts throwing things." I shrugged. I think he might actually be cool with it. He's always said we're like an old married couple. Caleb gave me a quick side-eye. "That's exactly why he'll be suspicious." "Well, maybe we just act normal," I said. "You and me?" He laughed. "Normal? Point taken." He reached over and took my hand, this time holding it fully. Fingers intertwined. No hesitation, no joke behind it. Just his palm against mine, solid and warm and steady. "You know," he said after a beat, "for years I thought if I ever let this happen us, I'd ruin it." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Me too, but last night, it didn't feel like ruining anything. It felt like I'd finally stopped lying to myself." I looked at him, really looked, and I knew exactly what he meant. The fear had always been there, like some invisible wall we kept skirting around. But now that it had broken, there was only this strange, exhilarating freedom. "I don't want to go back," I told him. His grip tightened slightly. "We won't." As we pulled into the next town, I spotted a small diner just off the highway. Neon sign, faded paint, the kind of place that always smelled like coffee and hash browns. "Let's stop here," I said. Caleb arched a brow. "You hungry?" "Not really," I admitted. "I just want to sit with you somewhere, like it's normal. Like we're just together." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that warmed all the way through me. "All right," he said, turning into the lot. "Let's be disgustingly domestic." The booth we picked had a window seat, sunlight pooling across the vinyl. We ordered 2 coffees, barely touched them. He played with the sugar packets while I picked at the napkin dispenser, and somewhere in between, his foot slid over mine under the table. Not accidental. Just there, present. We didn't need to say anything. The waitress came by, gave us a knowing smile when she caught the way Caleb looked at me like I was the only person in the room. Maybe she'd seen it 1,000 times before. Maybe that was the magic of it. It felt like the start of something. And at the same time, something ancient and inevitable. When we stood to leave, I noticed Caleb had left something on the table. His favorite silver ring, the one he always spun around his finger when he was nervous, was sitting beside the coffee mug. "You forgot this," I said, picking it up. "No, I didn't," he replied, holding out his hand. "Put it on me." I blinked. "What?" "Come on," he said, grinning. "Let's make it official. You've got the tools, remember?" I laughed, really laughed, as I slid the ring back onto his finger. His hand stayed in mine as we walked out of the diner. We didn't have everything figured out. Not yet. But we had the road ahead. We had mornings like this, and we had each other. That was more than enough to begin with.